Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm just going to try and take you through what's been basically a revolution in lighting. David said I've been in the business 40 years, just about, and I've just, the last 5 or 10 years, it's been a wonderful merry-go-round, really, of change, opportunity, and how things are developing very, very quickly. And I think the next 5 years, we're going to see even more change. But I just want to take you back, really, to where we started a few years ago. Going back to the good old days, you could say. About 2005, most of the UK was lit using sodium lamps, the high-intensity discharge sodium lamps, and about 93% of the roads were orange, either dark orange or bright orange, that golden white light orange that we still see. And we had a bit of white light, still had some mercury lamps left over from the 1930s going, or some newer metal halide lamps. But around about the same time, the organisation called the ILP, which is the Institution of Lighting Professionals, did a bit of a survey. And they discovered that the average wattage for a lamp was equivalent to a 70-watt sodium lamp. So we have, on the side roads, the typical wattages are sort of 50 to 70 watts. On the main roads, you're more like 200, 400 watts, as a rough comparison. But when they looked at the average for the UK, they said 70 watts was about right. So at the time there, we knew there was somewhere in the region of about 7.5 million streetlights in the UK, take the whole thing, and they burn for about 4,000 hours a year, dusk to dawn. I mean, it varies where we are across the country, but it's about 4,100 hours a year. Working on that, it works out that we spend, back in those days, use about 2.6 terawatts of power to keep our lights running. Now, the other thing that the UK was doing at the same time was looking at changing standards. The body called the CIE, who are researchers and scientists, have sort of looked at the position of white light. And they start to suggest that actually white light's far more efficient than yellow light and how we see. So back in 2003, I think it was, the UK were the first in the world to say, okay, if we use white light, we don't need to light the streets so brightly. We can drop it down a little bit, drop it down a whole class. And Italy was about the only other country in Europe that adopted it, and yet other countries around the world looked at it. But the standards were updated back in 2013 again, and a little bit more research from the scientific community said we have to do something to do with what they call SP ratios, which is a lovely little acronym, which just means that our daytime vision is photopic and our nighttime vision is scotopic. And it's just the relationship between those gives us an idea how much light we actually need to see at night. And by doing this, they say, yes, you can reduce the amount of light you need, and thereby not only reduce the light, but you can start to move towards an energy-saving solution. And about the same time, of course, we've now heard that there's a lot of interest in it. The EU recognised that LED technology had moved on. It had matured. It was a relatively safe bet. And if you consider that, on average, a local authority, half its energy consumption is on street lighting. If we can make a big difference to how that energy is saved, we can make a big difference to the local authorities' overall energy budget. It does vary. Cities and counties have different percentages. So the EU produced a report on it suggesting that this is a way forward. The Green Bank, set up a few years ago, they're now providing money. Vivian mentioned Salex and other bodies are now providing money to make these energy savings available to local authorities and the community. So how did it start? Well, in England, the UK government provided PFI funding. So back in the noughties or even the 1990s, there was a big cry out to say, look, all our lights are failing, they're going to fall over, they're very old technology. And the government came up and said, okay, we're going to give you some money, it's a PFI. So as you do building hospitals and other mechanisms, there was a lot of money made available. And as part of this, one of the early ones, one of the early adopters was Birmingham City Council. And they were negotiating with the contractors and said, well, look, we want to go down the LED route. But LEDs were relatively new at the time, where there's a bit of risk in here. Is it going to move forward or not? So the contractors said, yeah, we'll give you a 25-year guarantee on this. And all of a sudden, like the floodgates opened. Everybody could see that with the contractors providing a 25-year guarantee on these things, it's got to be a safe bet. So it kind of took off, particularly on the big cities. But not every authority had PFI funding. And these are just a few, there's many more now. And they looked at how can we get this LED savings in place, but we haven't got the PFI money behind us to do it. So I'm just going to talk through about 3 or 4 different locations where I've been involved across the UK, and how each one has a slightly different approach to achieving the same goal of improving the lighting plus reducing energy. So Peterborough will start off with that one. They've done it in some more bite-sized chunks. So a few years ago, back in 2011, they had their initial stage, and they've got about 26,000 lights in Peterborough in total. And the first phase was to try all the residential routes. So they rolled out about 7,000 lights. They look to have a CMS system, which Brian will be mentioning in a later session, how a CMS system can control the lighting, can dim it down to lower levels. And they're now just starting, they were so happy with that, they've now gone back, got further funding, more prudential borrowing, and they're basically going to do all the other residential lights in the city of Peterborough, and do the traffic routes as well as the next stage. They're already saving somewhere in the region of 65% of their energy along that process. The other approach is similar to a PFI approach, where Leicester City Council, and Leicester's now a place that everybody seems to know, has just finished a 3-year programme. They've changed all their 33,000 lights to LEDs. Their budget proposal was to save somewhere around about 55–60% at best. Now, because they've fitted LEDs and they dim it down at night to lower levels, and they've tuned every street to be just what they want it to be, they're actually achieving somewhere in the region of 75% energy savings. Phenomenal savings compared to what it was. And this is a street. So the one on the right is using a 60 LED, and the street on the left is using is 100 watts on. So you can still see the lighting works. In fact, it's better than the old SON, but at a significant energy saving. One of the things they looked at first off was to switch off, because when we had the price hike in the mid-noughties, they looked at, let's switch the lights off. So they looked at their energy load, which is the column on the left, and then they said, oh, well, if we switch it off, we'll save half that energy. So it dropped half the energy. But when they actually looked at LEDs, they said, well, actually, just changing to LEDs, we're going to save more energy than switching off the lights at night. And if you actually dim the lighting, that's when you get the biggest saving, really. So it's just an idea just how good they were at making that energy savings work. Another one is Rotherham Borough Council. They teamed up with a neighbour to get substantial savings, because between Rotherham and Barnsley councils, they have around 40,000 lights. So they went to the market and said, we've got 40,000 lights, give us a better price for these things. And they're already making savings. So on the traffic routes, they were saving about 50%, but in the residential areas, they're saving about 65% again. An example in Wales would be a Swansea City Council. They're looking at doing a lot of lights in there. Again, they're dimming, which is an important thing you can do. The thing about LEDs, the technology to dim, do lots of things with them is very simple. If you try to dim or dim down the existing type of HID lamps that we have on the road, the sodium, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible in some cases. But Swansea looked at it, and they looked at sort of their chart of energy. Now, they were talking about a 5% per annum raise, which might be a little bit on the high side. But in essence, it gives you the idea that over 25 years, the energy price was going to rise, their expenditure was going to go up. However, by swapping to LEDs, in essence, their energy still costs are going to go up. But at the end of 25 years, it would still be less than what they were paying now. So, a good justification for them. And more locally, we've been doing works with a number of local authorities up here. Dumfries and Galloway is a good example. They've looked at lighting. They want to make sure that they're up to speed with all the recognised technology, and they're doing it on a piecemeal account. So they're not doing a huge rollout. They're doing it far more bite-sized chunks at a time. But they're trying to get their targets done. And, you know, if you look at what they've done there, this is a town there where the bottom half of the screen is looking at the old Son and Socks, and it has a lovely orange glow over the city. If you like the orange glows over the city, not many people did. But they swapped to LEDs and that glow disappeared, and what we end up with is that the ability to, you can start to see the night sky again, which is a very important part of it. And of course they have the dark sky Gold Star Park in that area as well, which is something to be admired. So let's go back to the early slide. We were looking at the original stock there, and where are we now? Well, estimated, I would say this, is that currently LEDs account for something like 30% of the stock in the UK. We heard Vivian say by the end of this year about 15% of the Scottish stuff will be LED, which is all very good. And Socks and Son are diminishing in numbers. So some in the industry suggest that by the year 2020, around 75% of the street lights in the UK will be LED, because what we're seeing is just this rate of change over to LEDs is accelerating. As more authorities look to their neighbours, they find they've done it, they want to jump on board quickly as well. And they're starting to push the numbers out very quickly. So by that time there, we might be in a position of saving, compared to 2005, in 15 years, the UK might have saved somewhere in the region of 50% of its energy payments on street lighting. And as I said earlier, around 50% of a lot of local authorities' budget is spent on street lighting. So significant savings to be had and energy reductions. Just to finish off, I'm not quite sure on the timing, David. LEDs are very flexible. We have Wi-Fi. We're using Wi-Fi here now. Scottish universities, in working with others, has developed a thing called Li-Fi, or visible light communication. So you can send the same data that you get through Wi-Fi through light. And I believe Paris Metro have started to roll it out there. How long before we see the first outdoor installation in earnest? I don't know. And of course, smart lights is the talk of the town here. And basically, people like Google are coming in, they're looking at the technology, and maybe it'll be a whole new revolution in CMS and how we control the lights in the very near future. So if the future's bright, is it so bright though? Because I think the lantern manufacturers, from my point of view, the market will be saturated in about 5 or 6 years' time. And what the hell are we going to do then? Sorry for swearing. The lighting authorities, hey, they would have changed all their lights to LEDs. They're maintenance free for 20 years, maybe. But really they don't need much maintenance for 20 years. So do you need all those people there? Design consultants, well, maybe some new designs, but maybe the workload's going to drop. And finally, the contractors will not have to go out every year and change a lamp or clean the bowl or do all the other bits and pieces. Their workload will drop dramatically. So we're just going to see a change in the whole industry in the next 10 years. And that's about me done.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigel.